Let's continue our preparation for the UiPath Advanced Certification, and today we are going to see the last part of the activities and properties topic, and we are going to answer questions about background processes, about triggers, and of course, the properties for different activities that we have. With that being said, let's jump to my screen. Okay, so quickly before starting to answer the first question, I wanted to tell you that you can join the Discord server where you're going to find the UiPath Advanced Certification channel. And in this UiPath Advanced Certification, you're going to find all the questions. So you can actually go through these videos with me. So it's a really good way if you want to watch the whole series and prepare for the whole certification with me. That being said, let's jump to the first question. A developer uses background process automation on a single attended robot. What is a characteristic of the background process? Okay, so a robot can run simultaneous background processes that uses click and type into activities. This is clearly wrong because a background process should not have click and type into activities. That's one of the first conditions that we have in background processes. A background process can be transitioned to the foreground with the help of the use foreground activity. Now, this is the right answer because simply, if you have a background process that you have created in UiPath, if you use the activity use foreground, UiPath is no longer going to consider it as a background process, but it's going to launch it in the foreground, even though that it's making only background actions. Okay, as always, we're going to see the explanation. So here I have a background process. You can create a background process by opening UiPath and going here and creating a background process from the template. That being said, here I have a background process that basically waits for 5 seconds and then it logs a message saying I'm in the background. If I launch this process, let me launch it. As you can see here, I have a process in the background, and it's demonstrated by this little icon in it that I have here. If I hover over it, it would say background automation. Let's stop this process now. And let me use the activity use foreground. So I'm going to put the use foreground in here, and I'm going to put the do while activity. Let me save and let me rerun the process. So let's run file. And as you can see here, it's no longer considered as a background process, even though that the name is a background process, but it no longer has the little icon that was in the previous run. So here, let me stop the process. And of course, you can run as many background processes as you want. And if we click on publish, you will see here, before publishing, make sure the project does not contain interactive activities. So you can virtually add interactive activities like clicks and type intos, but it shouldn't be the case because you cannot expect the behavior if you run multiple background processes that have these interactions. That's why we shouldn't have them, and that's why the first answer is wrong. So as we have said, the right answer is the second answer. Now let's make sure that the third one and the fourth one are wrong. A robot can execute a maximum of 2 background processes at a time. That's wrong. You can execute virtually as many background processes as you want. It doesn't have a ceiling at 2. You can run as many as you want. A robot can transition interactive UI automation activities from the foreground to the background. Okay, so this is the thing. If we have a click activity or a type into activity, we can use properties like simulate type and simulate click, and that's going to make them in the background. But in reality, it still needs to interact with the foreground, even though that the hardware event is not happening and you can still use your PC while the automation is going on. If it has a UI automation, the whole process cannot be called a background process. The activity, yes, it works in the background because it doesn't need interaction, but it still can't be considered as a background process in a whole because of the thing that we just said at the start of the question. Okay, that's the first question. Let's go to the second question. A developer plans to create a process to automate a web application. In order for the robot to perform an action as soon as the element has appeared, regardless of whether other elements appeared or not, which property value should be configured? Is it the WaitForReady interactive? Timeout should be 0, simulate type equals true, or the WaitForReady should be none? Okay, so let's start with the obvious wrong answers. Timeout equals 0. Timeout is the maximum amount of time that we wait for a selector to appear. So if we give it 0, that means that the activity is going to fall in error every time. So that's clearly wrong. Simulate type equals true. That's basically to control if it's going to happen in the background or not. So this has nothing to do with waiting for the element to appear. Now, for the two answers and options that can be right, which is the WaitForReady. Is it going to be interactive or none? So here we're going to go to the documentation. And the documentation says the WaitForReady does not wait for anything except the target UI element to exist before executing the action. So it doesn't wait for anything but the elements. So meaning that this is the right answer. Interacting, on the other hand, waits for target app to indicate readiness. So it waits for the entire app to say, I am ready. And even though that there are some assets that are taking more time, it will still execute. The complete is where we are waiting for the whole application to be ready. Every element should be loaded in the screen before we can perform our action. If we want to wait for that exact element to be ready, it should be none. So the right answer in here is none. Okay, let's go to the next question. A developer is automating a process which retrieves technical product details based on user input. The process steps include asking the user for a product name, using the input as a search string in an online catalog, scraping the structured result list. The developer discovers that the title of the search results page is generated dynamically using the search string. Based on the graphic, what is the recommended way to ensure the robot locates the correct page? Okay, so it's a selector question. How can we make sure that the robot is gonna locate the right page? Fine-tune the next link selector property of the data scraping activity. Okay, so the data scraping activity is literally the sequence. So it doesn't make any sense to fine-tune the selector because we have no selector at the sequence level. We have selector at the attached browser and they extract structured data, but not data scraping. So this is clearly wrong. Fine-tune the selector of the data scraping activity. Same thing. The data scraping activity is a sequence. Fine-tune this, so this is wrong. Fine-tune the selector of the attached browser activity. So we want to locate the correct page, meaning that we have to actually act on the attached browser activity, not on the extract structured data, because we want to find the whole page that we are going to attach to, meaning that this is indeed the right answer. Let's make sure that the fourth answer is wrong. Limit the max number of results property to the number of results displayed on each page and create a loop. Well, this is clearly wrong because the max number of results is not going to help us locate the correct page, clearly. Second thing, we don't have a max number of results for each page. We have a max number of results for the whole thing. So this is the wrong answer. So the right answer is the third one. All right, so next question. This question is a bit long, so even if you feel like you're lost at the start, just bear with me and try to watch the whole thing. Everything is going to make sense at the end. So yeah, this question is on, it's actually on two screenshots. So let's read it together. A developer wants to monitor 3 buttons using a trigger, scope activity, and 3 click triggers activities. Okay, so we are monitoring 3 clicks. That's good. They have added a switch activity in the action section to configure different action depending on which trigger is activated. So we are monitoring 3 buttons, and then depending on which one we have clicked, we are going to have a different behavior. Okay. The type arguments property for the switch activity is set to string. That's good. So here we have the 3 clicks. We have the trigger scope activity. Then we have the 3 clicks inside that we are monitoring, 3 buttons. And then from that, we are going to get an args. And from this argument, we want to extract string because the args itself, it's an event info variable. So we want to extract a string from it because the type arguments property is a string. Okay, so the question now is, how should the developer configure the switch expression property and case fields? Good. So let's go to the next screenshots just to see the answers. Let's just read the expression and the cases. Let's leave them for later. Expression args.triggerName, expression args.eventInfo, expression args.equals, and expression args.triggerType.fullName. So from these answers, the first thing that we should think about is what is the method or the function that will give me a string? Is it trigger name, event info, equals, or trigger type.fullName? So here I have created a process where I can show you everything. So in this process, let's actually recreate it together. It's easier. So here I have a trigger scope. Sorry. Actually, it's here. And inside of this trigger scope, I have 3 clicks. By the way, if you're using a new version of UiPath, you have to go to Manage Packages and go to Project Dependencies and then draw back the system.activities to 2022.10.7. Because in the newer versions, the trigger scope activity does not exist. There's a new way of doing triggers, but that's not included in the certification yet. So make sure that you draw it back if you want to reproduce the same thing with me. So here, let's have a click activity. Let's have a click event trigger activity. Let's copy it and let's paste it. Okay, so now we have 3 and let's indicate on the screen. Let's, for example, say that we are going to act on this documentation page. This is the first button that we are going to monitor. Let's confirm it. This is the second button that we are going to monitor. Confirm as well. And then the third one is going to be the search button. Let's confirm it. Good. Now let's have our switch case activity. Okay, so here is the switch activity. And then let's change the switch activity type argument to string. So let's go to properties, to string. Good. And now let's have the args. Args dot, let's start with equals, for example. Equals, let's have this. So clearly we can't have equals dot parentheses without having an object inside of it. Otherwise we are comparing it to a nothing, and that will give us either true or false. It's not going to give us a string, clearly. So if we go back to the answers, this answer, the third one, is clearly wrong. Let's try with event info. There is no event info. We can't even use event info as a function for the args, so that's wrong. Let's try trigger type.fullName. Trigger type.fullName. Good. Okay. So here, actually, it's going to give us a string, but the problem is trigger type.fullName clearly is going to give us the type of the trigger. So if we go to the case, now we're not only going to see the expression, we're going to go to the case. If we go to the case, we're going to find bank, customer service, and report. This is clearly not the type of trigger. The type of trigger is a click trigger. So it has nothing to do with the cases that are listed here. So this can't be right. So here, for example, if we go here and do a message box, let's actually have it here outside, and let's put this and see what's going to happen. Let's debug the process. And I am going to click here. And as you can see here, uipad.uiautomation.activities.end-click-trigger. So the trigger type, let's go back here. The trigger type, that full name, is actually the trigger type. It's not going to give us these cases that are listed here. So this is also the wrong answer. We are left with this right answer, clearly. And It's clearly the right answer because we have a trigger name, which is going to give us the string type argument that we want. And it also, if we see here, the case 1, case 2, and case 3, click trigger bank, click trigger customer service. If you go back to the activities, we can clearly see that, yes, click trigger bank, click trigger customer service, etc., click trigger reports. So clearly this is the right answer because we are retrieving the trigger name of the activity that has launched the trigger. So this is the right answer. And I know if you haven't worked with trigger scope before, you're not going to know it. This is why I tried to do it with you in order for you to see it clearly. So this is clearly the right answer, and then the 3 others are wrong. Good. Let's stop the process that I've launched. Now let's go to the next question. A developer is creating a process to extract all text from multiple native PDF files. Which activity should the developer use to retrieve the text from an entire PDF file? Okay, so the keywords here is native PDF file. So we're not using scanned PDF file. You're not reading data from a scanned PDF file. And we are reading it from a native one, meaning that we are not going to have to deal with OCR. That's going to be the key for this question. So let's read the answer. Get text, read PDF with OCR. That's rolled out. That can be the case. That's wrong. Get OCR text. That's wrong. So we have get text and read PDF text. And in the previous video, if you have watched it, I said that read PDF text is the activity that we use in order to read PDF. Get text, it's an activity that we use if we want to retrieve data from a screen, generally speaking, not from a PDF. So read PDF text is going to be reading the data from an entire PDF file, from an entire native PDF file. So that's the right answer. And this type of question is actually really good because it helps you gain confidence during the exam. So that's good. Let's go to the next question. Review the following graphics. So we have a parallel activity. Then we have 2 find element activities, and this is their properties. So we have a timeout of 5,000 and we have a timeout of 10,000. Otherwise, we have a normal selector and nothing here is to worry about. So the only thing that we should be looking at here is the timeout. Based on the configuration shown in the graphics, what is the result of the execution of these activities if neither the calculator nor the snipping tool are open at runtime? So we have a find elements calculator and find elements snipping tool. Both of them are not open. And we have one timeout at 5 seconds and the other one at 10 seconds. So when we run parallel, we run them at the same time, meaning that the first one that's going to give any kind of result is going to be the one executed. So here, if we have 5,000 and 10,000, clearly the 5,000 one is going to be the first to give us an error. And the parallel container is going to react to the first activity that gives us anything. In this case, it's going to be an error. So clearly the calculator is going to be executed first. So let's reread the question and see the answers. Based on the configuration shown in the graphic, what is the result of the execution of these activities if neither calculator nor the snipping tool are open at runtime? Okay, so workflow throws an exception after 5,000 milliseconds. Find elements calculators activity timeout exceeded. Clearly the right answer. We don't even need to read the other ones. But let's read the other ones just to make sure. No exception is thrown and the workflow ends after 10,000 milliseconds. That's wrong. The parallel activity is not a try catch. It's a simple activity. If you have an error inside of it, it's going to give you the error. No exception is thrown at the workflow ends after 10,000 milliseconds. Workflow throws as an exception after 10,000 milliseconds. Find element snipping tool activity timeout exceeded. No, it's not going to wait for the second one. It's going to be the first one that's going to give us the error. No exception is thrown and the workflow ends after 15,000 milliseconds. Okay, that's a funny answer. And of course, it's the wrong answer. Okay. That being said, let's go to the next question. A developer is building a process that needs to click an element which requires a mouse hover to become visible. However, the element does not appear with the default click settings. The input method for the click activity is hardware event. Which property should the developer configure to be able to click the element? Okay. So here, let's read the answers. CursorMotionType instant, alter if disabled true, CursorMotionType smooth, alter if disabled false. So here we have to understand what is the property CursorMotionType and alter if disabled is doing in the first place. So let's go to the UiPath and let's have a click activity. Of course, I can't place it inside a trigger scope. Let's have it outside. Okay. So we have the CursorMotionType, and then we have the alter disabled element. So when selected, the activity executes the action even if the target element is disabled. Property does not apply if the input mode is hardware event. The default value is false. CursorMotionType specifies the type of motion performed by the mouse cursor. There are two options: instant, it jumps to the destination, the cursor jumps to the destination, and smooth, the cursor moves the increments. Settings has effect only if input method hardware events is used. The default option is instant. Okay, so here it's already said that we have the default option and it's not working. So clearly the instant CursorMotionType is wrong. So that's the first thing. The second thing, alter if disabled. So are we going to use the alter if disabled property? No, because the alter of disabled is only going to be active if the element is not active. We can see the element on the screen, but it's not active. That's when we use it. And if we are using the hardware event, it's not even going to work. It will have no effect. So the alter if disabled is wrong. And not only for the true, but also for the false, because if we are using the hardware event, true or false is not going to matter. So both of them are wrong. So by that logic, the CursorMotionType equals smooth is going to be the right answer. And of course, it's the right answer because once you are moving in increments and you actually go like a human being to an element, the element will show on the screen and we can use it. So clearly the CursorMotionType is the right answer. Okay, so let's move on to the last question in this video. A developer created the following sequence. So here we have a try-catch, and inside of the try block of the try-catch activity, we have a retry scope. And then inside of it, we have a counter plus 1. So we have an increment of 1 for this variable counter. And this is after the condition element exists. Okay, so the try-catch is straightforward. You try something. If there is an exception thrown by the activity, you go to the catch. That's straightforward. But the retry scope, I think we need to define it in order to understand what happens inside of it. So we're going to continue reading the question, and then we're going to define the retry scope activity. So here, the catch block within the try-catch activity contains the following activities. So here we have the catch, and the value of counter is counter.toString. It's a log message, so we're logging the value of counter. Let's go to the next screenshot. The property for try-catch activity are shown. There is nothing to see here. The following reflects the properties for the retry scope. This is very important because here we can see that the number of retries of the retry scope is empty. And the retry interval is also empty. That's less important. The most important thing is the number of retries. It's empty. The properties for the element exists activity are shown as follows. So here we are waiting for 5 seconds for the element inside of the element exists activity. And this is also very important. The counter default value is 1. Of course, it is an int 32. And the default value is 1. So based on the exhibit, what is the value of the counter variable when the target application is not open? So is it going to be 1, 2, 3, or 4? Meaning that we are going to launch this process this process here. And if the snipping tool is not open, what is going to be the log that is going to be shown by this activity log message, value of counter? What is going to happen here? Is it going to be 1, 2, 3, or 4? You know what? Let's not just answer the question right away. Let's have some fun with this question. I want to create the process with you guys and see what's going to happen. So the number of this question is 26. So let's go back here and create a new sequence, and let's call it 26. And here, let's put a try catch. Inside of it, let's have a retry scope. And inside of the retry scope, we're going to have an assign. And of course, we're going to go to variables. We're going to create counter variable. It's going to be inside the try catch. And of course, it's going to be in int 32. And here, the counter happen. Counter variable. We are going to increment it by 1. The condition is going to be an element exists. Of course, guys, check the classic activities so you can actually get it. So the element exists. Let's put it here, and let's open the snipping tool. Let's indicate on the screen, and let's indicate anything in the snipping tool. Let's indicate whatever. So here we have the element exists. And good. And of course, in the catch, we're going to catch any exception. And let's put a log message in here. Let's keep the log level empty, meaning it's information. And let's put the counter value is. And here, let's have counter that to string. Easy stuff. Okay. So we have created the process. We said we are going to define the retry scope activity. Let's go and actually define it. So we are in the official documentation. Retries, so the retry scope activity, retries the contain activities as long as the condition is not met or an error is thrown. So if the condition is not met, meaning that we have a false in this activity, it's actually returning false, or we have an error that is thrown by this activity that we have in the condition, we are going to retry the scope. So we're going to retry it by a max number of the number of retries that we have here. If the condition is met, meaning that, for example, element exists in here, it's going to find it. We basically going to go to the next activity and we're now going to retry the scope. So yeah, pretty clear. Now let's close the snipping tool as they have said in the question, and let's launch the process. And actually, I want you to pause the video and just, actually try to answer the question yourself. What do you think the answer is going to be? Is it going to be 1, 2, 3, or 4? So pause the video and choose an answer, of course, an educated guess, and then unpause it for us to see the answer together. So after choosing an answer, let's run the file and see what's going to happen. Let's debug it. No, I don't want it to debug the main. Let's debug 26. That's good. And here I can see that it starts debugging. Actually, I did something wrong. And the element exists. If I go to properties, I didn't set the timeout to 5 seconds. So let's set it to 1 second. I don't want to wait for so much. 5 seconds or 1 second, it's going to be the same thing. 5,000 or 1,000, it's the same result. So let's set it to 1,000 just for it to go faster. And here, the last thing that I also forgot to do is the 1. The default value should be 1. So good. So the default value is 1. And now we can debug the process or the sequence that we have here. So we have debugged it. And the answer, of course, is going to be The answer, of course, is going to be 4. So if you go to output in here, the counter value is 4. Why? Simply because when we don't have the number of retries set, if we leave it empty, it's going to be 3 by default, meaning that we go the first time, 1 plus 1 is 2, then this is going to be false. The element doesn't exist. Then 2 is going to be 3, then 4 because 3 times. And after treating this 3 times, we are going to basically leave the retry scope because we have finished it 3 times, and we're going to go to the exception, and the value, of course, is going to be 4. So yeah, this is the answer. This is a really good question because a lot of people don't know how to use the retry scope. It actually can be really handy, especially if you want to do retrying of login pages, for example, and you want to do it like multiple times, 2 or 3 times. The retry scope can come in handy. Not a lot of developers use it, but it's really important and it's really useful as an activity. That being said, we have finished the activities and properties, and in the next video, we are going to see the robotic enterprise framework, so it's going to be a really important video. One last thing I wanted to share with you guys before leaving is the ChatGPT, so the retry scope behavior. So I asked it if I leave the number of retries empty, what's going to happen in the retry scope activity? So the question was, in UiPath, how many times does the activity retry scope run if the condition is not met and the value number of retries is left empty? And the answer was, in UiPath retry scope activity, the condition is not met and the value of number of retries is left empty. The activity will run indefinitely and until the condition is met or its manual stopped or interrupted. So basically, it's considered as a do while. It didn't even understood what a retry scope is, but the answer is always affirmative, like always. ChatGPT will give you an answer as if it really knows the thing without actually knowing it, like it always does. So all I'm saying is, don't trust ChatGPT with answers like this, with specific things like this. Don't trust generative AI in general unless you have trained them. And even if you have trained them, you actually have to kind of know what is all about. So Google is better than ChatGPT in this case, and videos and cross-checking with different sources will help you tremendously with these questions. So don't rely on generative AI when it comes to questions for the UiPath Advanced Certification. With that being said, thank you guys for watching, and until next time, you guys be safe. Peace.